Welcome, podcast family, once again to Regulation Revolution. This is Barry Vassar, and I am here with Amy Reamer. And we want to talk to you today about regulation in a place we don't think of it quite often, regulation in the workplace. So we're calling it working through the workplace. Think of those situations, those people, those times when something has just rubbed you the wrong way. Maybe it was the wrong phrase. Maybe it was just a personality conflict. And you have to deal with that, right? You have to work with this person, or you have to work with that client, or you have to work with your clientele, whatever that may be. But yet your tiger, your owl, and your hippo are still present with you at work, and things come up. Amy, would you like to kick us off, or would you like me to kick us off?
Why don't you go ahead? We had a recent situation, and so we thought it would be a good one to share. So you wanna start? I can jump in.
Yeah. So folks, this was beautifully timed. So we spent a particular Monday planning out what the topic would be for the following week, and we came up with regulation in the workplace. These very things that we were just talking about. Now, this was on a Monday, and by Wednesday, Amy and I are at it. To put it simple, we're not at it in a bad way, but we had a situation where I was bringing something to Amy, just trying to get an opinion. I was just trying to get an opinion, but the way I worded it, it was like I was dropping it in her lap. At a time at which, and many of you people know out there that, I'm a practice manager at Heart and Mind, Amy's owner at Heart and Mind. So you've got power dynamic in there, which we're going to talk about that a little bit. But in this instance, it was in my wording. Instead of saying, here's what I plan on saying, what do you think? I said, I'm getting with Amy to find out. And whatever reason in that moment, that tripped her tiger. Mm-hmm. Amy, would you like to pick up the story from there?
Yeah. So, and I'll also preface this that we're not telling this story to say that there's a perfect way to do this, right? We're just saying everybody is individuals. Everybody has their own experiences and brings their own sort of crap to the table. And so, another person, if Barry had said it's something this way, it may not have tripped off their tiger, right? Because we're all individuals, and our tigers have their own things, right? So I just want to start off by saying this is not a how-to and how to avoid. It's to understand better, right? So yeah, and everybody's kind of got their own journey. So Amy's going through this journey of not being in charge of everything and having to do everything. And so, and that's simply because when you start a business, you have to do everything. And as it's growing, you're kind of doing everything. And then when, if it gets to a certain point, it works better to, start delegating and all that good stuff. But that can be hard because, it's your baby. You've been doing things, you've been making the decisions. It can be hard to trust people. It could be hard to step back and all of that good stuff. So I think sometimes, and especially we know when things are done via text or email or chat or whatever, of course, you don't have tone of voice. We don't have face, and it's so much easier to put our own sort of story and spin on what someone is thinking or doing or why, right? And so I would say what I learned, and this was not in the moment, so just so everybody knows, this was probably a 48-hour processing time or something to get to where we can actually talk on a podcast about it. Because in the moment it's just emotional. In the moment it's just this, that, we're just feeling. My little radar back. Oops, he's back on the shoulder. Radar. The tigers are just all feeling things. They're just rambling of feelings and all of that. Sometimes we just don't even know why. So it took a while. This took a while for me thinking on my own, reflecting with my husband, talking with Barry. This took a while for me to even figure out what was going on with my own tiger. I think it's always good. It's funny, in a Facebook group I'm in with some other therapists, there's a practice owner who was having an issue with an employee and was talking about her own, like basically her own tiger, talking about her own triggers, and was asking for like advice from other folks and stuff. And the only advice I gave her was, yeah, it's not good to deal with it when you're in a dysregulated state. Like that tiger is awake, not the time to try to sit down and have that talk with that employee. Because again, you got the power dynamic, right? And so if you come at them angry or upset or whatever, it's a whole other ball game, and then they're going to have a story going on in their head, right? So we're going to have this back and forth going on.
Well, what I found so interesting about this experience that we went through together was that one of the things that Amy and I talked about, because we stayed engaged for 2 days, right? We weren't fighting. I think at the end of the day, we realized that we weren't even arguing. We weren't, like, she wasn't mad at me. I wasn't mad at her. I really didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. We just had big feelings in the moment. And so, as Amy said, and you may have experienced this too, this experience was similar to why I got triggered. And I got triggered in a different way. Usually Barry's the over the top, lash out, go kick the tire guy, which I'll forever reference that. In this instance, I did not lash out. The words I used was I collapsed in, which was different for me. I mean, I was going to into that sort of dorsal state. But it was similar to an experience I'd had several years ago. It was almost the exact same set of circumstances. And all of that in my hippocampus, which I always say hippo pokes the tiger, went knocking and said, it's happening again. And so, but my tiger didn't go to let's attack. My tiger actually went to freeze almost. It is so, to not to give all the details of it, but it was so interesting in there as we did continue to text back and forth, where I said to Amy, I did everything we tell our parents to do. I'm like, I came along beside you and I made statements and I played the role of sadness. And I was like, wow, that must hurt. And none of that would be heard in the moment. And so that's it. I was trying to get a point across in a logical, factual manner. When she was
talking to Owl, I was Tiger.
Yeah.
You were talking to Owl and I was Tiger.
And she was talking Tiger. But now think about this, folks, for out there. Listen, how many times in your work environment has it just been the email and you assigned a tone to it, or the look an employee or supervisor gives you, and that what's getting triggered is it's reminding you of my old boss or that old employee. We got another one of these. That's those where you're bringing those past experiences. Not everything is trauma that we're bringing to the table. Just those past experiences of, you could have a supervisor that reminds you of your uncle who you do not like. And just because they remind you of them, you're resistant to their leadership. It's amazing, I think, how much people are bringing to the table when they go to work, because they bring their whole family history, their work history, all the bruises, everything. So how do we stay regulated in the workplace? Amy, we've got Owl, Tiger, and Hippo there. So,
well, I think it's a dynamic that's more similar to like a parent-child dynamic than it is to, like, say, a couple's dynamic where you're on more similar footing, or there's more of a balance of power, so to speak, most of the time.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that we can't get some of the same triggers or whatever, but I think there is a different dynamic there. Like, there are so many things I have encountered owning a business that have been, where, not saying that my employees are children, but like that, that there's this dynamic where they will have a response to me like they would have to like a parent or another authority type of a figure, because of the power dynamic. As a supervisor, like, we learn about this in clinical supervision. We're in a position of power when you have a supervisee. As a therapist, we are in a position of power with a client because they could be very vulnerable. They're looking to you for advice, right? So you have to be, it's the old Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Not, I can climb walls or anything. We just kick tires. But there's that level of power dynamic that whether you like it or whether you don't, if you're in it, you're in it, and you have to deal with it. So I don't see myself that way. I tell everybody, like, I don't see myself as a boss. I don't see myself as an owner. I am Amy. But even if I just try to be Amy, to many people, there's still going to be like this. Oh, it's the owner. Oh, it's my supervisor. Oh, it's, and so that can be difficult. So I think it's just like we always talk about regulation. A lot of it is about self-awareness of, what's being triggered. Is it really about what's happening in the moment? Is it really about what that employee said or did, or what that employer said or did? Or is it my own sort of belief system? If I'm a perfectionist and I get really upset about mistakes, and someone brings up a mistake I made, I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. Are we going to that place because of either or other histories, or just not being good enough, or wanting to please, or, like, what is it we're doing in that relationship that might be different than the next person? What I have learned through my years, and I haven't learned everything by far, but I'm an experiential learner. So when I go through it, hopefully I have learned something from it. But what I have learned is I can be the same person with several people, and they will see me very differently. One person might say, "Oh, you're unapproachable," and then the next person says, "You're very approachable." And I'm sitting here going, "Oh my God, how can I make myself more approachable if someone says I'm not?" What I'm learning, that's not necessarily about me all the time. I'm not saying we still have a responsibility to be kind and to be thoughtful. Like, we still have a responsibility to be our best selves, but even being, it's just like we said, and with Robin, if you listen to the episode with Robin Goebel about, we can offer safety, but it's their nervous system's job whether to accept it. And sometimes when someone's in a power position, there's a lack of safety there that either is coming from you or could become past.
But in our situation, that other piece that came up, and I'm glad you brought up safety in relationship. I think a lot of that is really where some work needs to be done in the workplace, is being able to know the person well enough, especially if you got to work closely with a small group of people. Knowing the person, not their role or their job, but knowing the person well enough that you feel safe with them. And so that even if the trigger pops up and, they just reminded me of my old coworker. You do a little bit of many parts work. This is not my old coworker, recognizing that was a different experience. This person may have similarities, but I know them well enough that they are not this person over here. And so, like in our situation, in total honesty, it was one of the most beautiful things. Once we realized that we actually weren't fighting, we actually realized we weren't arguing about anything. I said something to Amy, and she said it back to me, and I know Amy to be a truthful person. I looked at her, I said, "Nowhere in here did I ever think about quitting, and I didn't even think you were going to fire me." And she was like, "Never crossed my mind to fire you, and I didn't think you were going to quit either." And I was like, that is safety, right? That is safety. Forget about the power dynamic. I know the person, right? Yeah, boss, owner, great, wonderful. But I also know the person. And so I felt comfortable enough to say things like, that hurt my feelings. That hit my button. And she's like, "Well, this kind of hurt me, and I'm sorry for this, and this hit my button." And it's like, okay. And I think after 2 days, I was like, "Can we still hug it out? Can we hug it out?" And so, and to give you frame of reference, now this is how quickly, when you do it, and not saying that we got it right or we always get it right, but recognizing when the break has occurred, figuring out what the break is about, it becomes a whole lot easier to come back for the repair. Because to give you a time frame, this was just Tuesday a week ago, and we're recording on a Monday. So it was just 6 days ago. So this is still fresh. So I think in the workplace, would you advise, because I do things much more confrontationally, for the guy who collapsed in for once and still trying to get over that. I'm a big fan of when somebody comes to me and says, "I don't think such and such likes me." I'm like, well, what gives you that impression? No, list out. I'm like, so why don't you ask them? No, I don't want to do that. Well, why not ask? Why not say, I am triggered by you, right? You don't have to say I'm triggered by you because that can be off-putting. But you can say, hey, if sometimes I walk out the room when you're talking, I'm not doing that to be disrespectful. I have a low threshold. And so when conversation gets too long, it just mentally drains me and I have to excuse myself. So it's not you. This is, you know what I'm saying? That sort of, so now you're letting them know, this is why you have to be in a room with a window. You feel claustrophobic if you have, oh, well, that makes sense. Why does this person get the special privilege of the room with the window and this person doesn't? This person needs it. Oh, so you're not just being entitled or, being selfish. But that only happens, though, if you get to know the people you're working with. So would you encourage that direction? Would you say that's at least one way of, well, just go ask or just go tell?
Yeah. Yeah. And, supervisors, managers, bosses, whatever, they have to pay attention to their own, because just because someone brings a concern or an issue to them, one, you may or may not have to fix it because, or you may not be able to fix it. There may be a particular reason, we have a therapy room with no window. I cannot afford to go add a window. Right. But like you said, maybe you can make some scheduling changes or talk with other therapists and you can swap rooms or something, something like that. Cause some people are going to be bothered by it. Some people aren't, everybody's different. So I would encourage, folks who are in sort of that power position to recognize that when people come to them about something, or like you said, maybe they're behaving a certain way or they're asking for something or whatever, that it's not necessarily, and this is a thing I have to work through too, it doesn't mean that I've messed up. It doesn't mean that I've done something wrong. It doesn't mean my company's not being run well or whatever. And so I would say it's really more when you can feel the spice. I don't know, spiciness is a good word, but like the spiciness of what's going on doesn't match, that meal that's happening there.
Right.
So, when it's over the top, and that once you start paying attention and look inward, it gets much easier, right? It gets way easier to recognize it. We can feel it. We recognize it's like a thermostat and the temperature going up. It's like, whoop, I can feel it. It's going up. And recognizing that most of the time, it doesn't really have anything to do with the current situation.
It's funny because in that direct approach, I remember I worked with somebody one time. This was, as we learn more about Barry in the world, I worked with somebody some time ago, and I would scooch away and I would shift my position, blah, 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 blah. And they looked at me and they said, do I smell or something? And so they called me out. So they noticed what I was doing. Right. And I looked back and just as honestly as I could, I said, you're a very tall person and you lurch over me. So when you stand over me and you're talking to me, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. And they were like, oh, well, I didn't know that. I can just back up. And I'm like, so that was a me thing. And that was, they pointed out. And once we did that, we would joke because then they would walk in the room and they're like, I'm coming to look over your shoulder at your computer. Are you ready for it? And I go, yes. Go ahead. But it was just, I felt like, and I realized what that was, believe it or not, folks, do your parts work. I'm telling you, talk to the hippo. All that amounted to was this one individual teacher I had that would stand over top of me whenever I wasn't doing the work. And literally I could feel the breath coming down on my neck because I had to stop and do my own work and say, why does this bother me? And it could have been anybody under 5'10". But when you started hitting up into 6'3", when you had a 6'3" teacher that kind of lurched over your shoulder, why aren't you getting it done? I can remember our hippocampus. Yeah. I remember the morning coffee breath from the teacher hitting you in the face. And so
all the sensory pieces. Yeah.
So it's funny because it took me a little bit to kind of put it together. I'm like, why is it? Because it's not the person. The person's great. So my feelings did not match the situation, really.
Yeah, right. And but also to let folks know too, you're not gonna always able to figure it out, right? You may not
Right.
always be able to put a finger on a particular memory,
Hmm.
but if you just step back from the
Hmm.
situation and recognize this doesn't match what's going
Hmm.
on. There's my tiger's coming out and I have no idea why. And that's
Hmm.
okay if you don't figure it out because you may not always.
Hmm.
Sometimes it may just be more the feeling, right? The feeling of not feeling safe or
Hmm.
not feeling good enough or not feeling appreciated.
Hmm.
Not, those types of things. And so if you notice the feeling, that can be helpful. I think, the hardest part, and I just speak because of this is more my position of being more of the business owner. I have a lot more safety and security because nobody can fire me, right? So now, of course, I can do things that could upset could run my business into the ground. Certainly,
Hmm.
I can still do things that don't go well, or things can happen. There's certainly stress, obviously, there,
Hmm.
but I have a lot more control over that too, right? Usually, if
Hmm.
something's gone well in the business, then I've made a good decision, or I've listened to my team and we've done things. I'm not saying it's always me that did it well or whatever, but I had a hand in it doing well. And then if something went bad, it's usually because I made a mistake and I went in the wrong direction or was impulsive or didn't investigate something enough, right?
Hmm.
So yes, there's certainly stress and there are stressors, but as far as relationship,
Hmm.
I'm in a pretty safe place because people can't necessarily send me away from my business. They
Right.
can't kick me out because they're upset with me. So that
Right.
you have to be careful that you don't get into this really comfortable place of, well, coming at somebody to find out something because they're going to be more afraid of their
Hmm.
position or their pay or their benefits or their whatever that they've got a risk
Hmm.
at losing. And so, and our systems that people grow up in, most of the time, they don't have a lot of autonomy. They don't have a lot of ability. And so they could have come from, like you said, very authoritarian types of teachers or
Hmm.
parents or other workplaces with other bosses or things like that. And oftentimes the fear-based system, right? Because we've used
Right.
fear to motivate people in so many areas.
Hmm.
So they're used to going straight to the fear side, right? Like
Right.
of what might happen. And our brains are kind of wired to do that anyway, right? We've talked about
Hmm.
that. So being mindful, I think
Hmm.
for people in the power positions, whether you're a manager, supervisor, that kind of thing. And I think anybody who's ever been like I don't want to say regular person, but sort of like in with the most of the employees, and then they get a promotion,
Hmm.
they see how relationships and dynamics change and
Hmm.
how some people may treat them differently because they now are in a position of power, even if they're the exact same person and they may
Hmm.
not even be directly over them, right? Like they may not even be their direct supervisor,
Hmm.
but then they start to get treated differently because of that power, that position. So I think that's probably the biggest issue with workplace stuff is power. Now, of course, it can happen between colleagues, right? That
Hmm.
people are on the same level, whether they're look at us, we're both in sort of management and in sort of that level. That can certainly happen too.
I feel like it's that the key to, or one of the keys to it is communication, however it takes place. And, when it's appropriate in the right way. Because again, I come back to if you understand the individual, I think it can also calm your nervous system a little bit. If you know why they do what they do and why they are the way they are, right? And if you know yourself well enough to know this is what's triggering me, this is what's going on. I try to I've always tried to kind of, I can't really say always, but stay in my own lane. Like I don't compare myself to anybody else. Like no matter what the job is, I just do the best I can with what I got, and I go to bed at night with that's what I did. Well, you didn't work as long as they did. No, I didn't. You didn't work as hard. No, I didn't. You didn't work as fast. No, I didn't. This is who I am. So where this other person, I think we get in that. Why does this person have, or why does this person do? Instead of looking at it, if it really bothers you that much, first off, why is it bothering you? Right? Is it because you're a slacker? Is it because you're intimidated by an overachiever? Maybe have some communication with, we get land of make believe. We both get projects. We have 5 days to get it done. You do yours in 2. It makes me look bad. That's where people go. It makes me look bad that it takes me 5 days. And no, it doesn't make you look anyway. This person just did it in 2. You chose to do it in 5. You both got it done by the deadline. But being able to communicate with that person, maybe find out, hey, how do you get it done in 2 days? Maybe learn something, as opposed to just saying, well, they're just brown nosing.
Well, I think in conflict, and this comes up all the time, so I don't think this is any different. Any type of conflict, a lot of it is about expectations, right? And when expectations aren't met, whether they're your own expectations, whether they are your bosses or your job's expectations, or it might be what you think is the expectation, right? So in your scenario you just gave, the two days versus 5 days. Okay, yeah, we were given 5 days, but now you might think, oh, this boss is now going to think they're better than me because they got it done in 2 days. So they're that expectation on the supervisor, not really necessarily knowing if that really is going to impress them. They might not even know that it was done in 2 days, because that person might not turn it in or send it in until the 5-day mark, and they're going to go do other stuff, right? So they may not even know they did it in 2 days. You just know that, right? So I think we, like you said, we have to sort of pay attention to what our own triggers. That's been a biggest learning thing for me, is I can only pay attention really to my own triggers. One other thing that might be helpful to other business people out there, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing it, but my business coach uses Enneagrams a lot and encourages supervisors, especially with if you have a leadership team or manager, or if you have my business is not very big, so even you could do it with everybody. And it's not about this number. And if anybody's not familiar, Enneagram is kind of like one of those personality tests, and you have a number, and when you answer the questions, and it talks a little bit about what they like, tend to be their triggers, who do they tend to get along with, other numbers, and then what numbers do they tend to kind of have more conflict with. A lot of times this is about personality. I could actually read a lot into it as far as our nervous system and our energy levels and extrovert versus introvert, those kinds of things. But the biggest part I think that's helpful with it is knowing each other. So if I were to look at your Enneagram and notice that, hey, these are the things that are typically, if someone is this number, these are the things that they might get triggered by the most. And that doesn't use the word triggered, but that bother them the most. Like you said, then I might be like, oh, this isn't about me. This is just typical, for someone with this type of personality, right? Certainly not in stone as far as your number is, I don't think, but people change obviously over time. But I think that's another way, you can have that conversation where, hey, here's my Enneagram, here's my stuff, and here's yours. And you can get, like you said, getting to know the person as opposed to going off of our own internal experiences and all those flagged memories of hippos and stamped.
That's the thing that I talk to people so often about, is we each have a narrative for different situations. And so when all the stars line up that match that narrative, then we draw the conclusion of what's going to happen, or what the person's thinking, or what the person's feeling. And it's just not always that accurate, because that narrative was written around somebody else at a different point during certain circumstances. Just so happened you fit the criteria today, right? So I'm getting triggered by it, whatever it may be. But yeah, on the Enneagram thing, I remember when I think one of mine was in there, is that and my clients know this well, that I'm not likely to suffer from compassion fatigue. I might get tired, I might get burnt out, but it ain't because I've used up all my compassion. But knowing that, right? Knowing this, one of the comments I made about you, actually I made it behind your back and I made it to your face because I got it from you, is dorsal is kind of your go-to. That is your place, kind of down here. Now you would think, oh, well, everything just rolls off of dorsal people, right? They're just kind of, no. When their tiger comes out big. So, so if you, and I'm going to relate this to like to everybody out there in the world, to their coworkers. So if you've got that quiet coworkers, kind of low energy, they do their thing and blah, 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 blah. That's the one that when you hit them the wrong way is going to pop off on you, is more likely to have a big feeling. They just haven't been triggered right? They haven't been triggered yet. So it's just interesting that if you can kind of do your own watching the folks around you and say, oh, okay, this person's got a very hyper personality, or you got a very Barry personality over here. Why is he just talking slow and sitting here today? Something's got to be going on if Barry's not high energy, right? Go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say also, it's just like practicing something. The more you do something, right, like the better you get at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your home away from home is dorsal, then you have handled things from more of a dorsal state.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have as much practice in sympathetic. You don't have as much practice in the tiger mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you may not handle tiger mode as well, because you just aren't used to it. People who tend to go more toward their home away from home more as sympathetic, their tiger's pretty well. And you, like you said, you went to kind of collapse state, and that was weird for you, right?
Yeah.
You're not familiar with the dorsal area. Like that's like weird. It's not the normal thing. What does this mean? Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. When something's new, where all of the tigers, it's my radar back there again. Radar job is to decide whether something is safe or not. And so for you, dorsal might be kind of new, and it's like, what the hell is this? And so, is checking it out, right? So again, and neither one of them are bad. It's just you might be more familiar with one versus the other, and so you might be more skilled in managing your regulation in one area or another. And so, a lot of that I think has to do with how we've grown up, what emotions were okay to have, how we were encouraged to work with our emotions. Some of this, I think, is societal and cultural, right? Like, I think men are generally seen as it's a little more okay to be angry or upset or to, be physical. Whereas women have been, kind of a little bit more like you're supposed to be quiet and, you're supposed to be an angry woman, like that kind of a thing. So again, general terms, it doesn't mean it's across the board for everybody, but I think there are just societal and cultural norms that also impact our nervous systems and how they work. So, and then how they interact with each other. So like you said, if you've got a very high level person who tends to be more sympathetic, they're more tiger, and you've got somebody who's down here, so you got fire tiger and ice tiger, they may not communicate really well, or they may kind of stay away from each other, or they may run into problems more.
Well, I had a brief discussion about why this topic. I was just talking with somebody else, and where it stemmed from was, think about, and I know there are people out there that have experienced this, right? They go to work all day long, they hold it together. Picture the clerk behind the register, smiling, yes, I'll get this for you, doing whatever, blah, 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 holding it all together. And then they get in the door and then they go ballistic with their whole family. And so when I was asked about, regulation in the workplace, well, why is that so important? As long as you can hold it together and deal with your coworker, what's the problem, right? Why do you have to do all this work to figure it out? I'm like, because it's going to show up someplace else. You're holding it together. It's that old phrase, and I can't remember the exact numbers on it. You give the best 90% of yourself to the people who matter the least. And so that last 10%. And so when you get home, you're in your safe place, right? Hopefully you're not going to get fired if you raise your voice here. You're not going to get ridden up if you storm out. And so now I'm in my safe place. That person's in that safe place. And so why do we need to have regulation in the workplace? Because it's not about just holding it together and not reacting. because it is going to pop up someplace else. But if you can learn to learn more about parts work, recognizing the ice tiger, the fire tiger, personality types, getting to know people, you're now addressing it and actually being regulated. People think being regulated in the workplace means I didn't go ballistic today. And I'm like, that's not being regulated. Your whole nervous system was off all day. You just didn't react.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, I think there's a great deal of relevancy in taking the time to do this. And it's funny because I did talk with an individual. I won't say what field they're in, but it's more of a show up and fix the pipes at your house type job. And they're like, so really? I drive around the truck all day by myself. So when I show up, I really don't care if you like me or not or where your nervous system is. I'm here to fix the pipes. I'm here to get the possum out your attic. And so I've noticed for those folks, at least ones I've run across, they're very well regulated because this is just showing up, punch the clock, and go. It's the ones where you have to have interpersonal relationships all the time. I think that
right. Yes. The closer the dynamics, and and we've been in a situation like that where we worked somewhere where there was more distance between sort of talking about line workers, kind of the folks who are on the ground doing sort of that work, but they don't have much interaction with the person at the top, right? And as soon as they would get promoted and go up into management and get closer to the person at the top, that it would all fall apart because the person at the top could come in and show up at a meeting, do a little training, that kind of thing with the folks at the bottom, but then they tried to have actual relationship with folks and have to manage a business and operate as a team and collaborate and all of that, because whatever their own, history is, they had trouble with that. And then they can't manage that. And then that would cause turnover, and so it didn't necessarily overall affect everything. Business was able to kind of keep running and sort of survive, but it didn't really thrive. It didn't do what it really probably could have done had there been a better ability to manage relationship. But but from like the boss's perspective, the boss can only do part of that, right? Like they can only offer, it's like that again, you can offer that. It depends on whether the person that they're offering it to is ready to sort of accept that and can trust in that and can be authentic with that. And so there's a lot to be said for folks who have that level of recognizing that my stuff is my stuff, your stuff is your stuff. When they come in, when they start to battle, we'll back up, take a breath, and figure out our own stuff. Then we'll talk together to figure it out together. I mean, I think, if you want to make it as simple as possible, that's probably the simplest way I can describe it. Certainly not easy to do, but it is simple to describe.
Well, I think it's a matter of, it's a matter of taking the time when identification, recognition, like you said, and awareness. Okay, the bottom line, simplest thing, man, that person rubs me the wrong way. Stop right then, maybe an hour from then, whatever. Start jotting down, because I like writing. Why is it rubbing you? Why are they rubbing you the wrong way? And chances are they're the same way with everybody. And I love it. I love it when I talk with folks. My favorite is in the couples realm of counseling. And I will usually have one person say, I get along with everybody at work. Everybody likes me. I'm the life of the party and I'm so much fun. She hates me. It's like, she's the only one that has a problem with me. Well, I'm like, if this is true, I'll look over at partner. I'm just making that up in this case. I'll look over to partner and say, do they get along well with others? Yeah, they get along with their brothers and sisters. They get along with extended family. They get along well at work. Everybody's always singing their praises. Then maybe the problem is you. Maybe it's not them. Maybe it is you. What is it? And then you can find out something. So you think of the coworker situation, right? Why is this person rubbing you the wrong way? Well, we've said before, I've got a kind of over the top, loud personality. that might totally rub somebody the wrong way because maybe they had a loudmouth daddy. I don't know. Maybe they got to deal with a husband like me at home and they don't want to have to deal with that in the workplace. But it
Right.
doesn't mean there's something wrong with my
Also,
personality.
I think a good word is overlap, right? There's some
Right. Overlap. Yes.
overlap between your history and something this person's bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
What is that overlap, right? And
Right.
is that they are doing something legitimately that's wrong? Like, are they being mean? Are they being nasty? Like, I mean, we're obviously not just giving people a pass to be rude and
Right.
nasty, but just, you know, I mean, like I had when I was in school, I had a coworker that with a professor was like, there's something about this professor that's really bothering me, but it doesn't make sense. She's really nice, blah, blah, blah. And so I had been, you know, learning about traumatic memories and that kind of stuff. And I just said, is there something about her that reminds you of anybody else? And then you just saw, I mean, literally almost like a cartoon, all the like light bulb, you know, pop over her head.
Right.
And there were mannerisms that this professor had that were very similar to a person that had been involved in a traumatic event in her past. And it's, so to me, this is the right brain, the left brain connecting. And so her right brain said, this person is unsafe. But her left brain was saying, this is a professor. I've just met her. She's very nice. Like, there's no reason for me to think she's unsafe. This doesn't make sense, Tiger. What are you talking about? You're confusing me. So like you said, the Hippo threw out the memory, pulled up the file with the, you know, the files with the little tabs on them. Hippo pulled out the memory of her traumatic event because of the professor. And the tiger's waking up and going, we got to watch out here. But the owl was going, this doesn't make sense. You know, but I don't know why it doesn't make sense. So the owl can't solve it for everybody and make everybody feel safe. But as soon as the connection was made between the memory and the professor and the why, boom, gone. You know, so it's basically now the tiger has listened to the owl that says, no, that memory is from this person. The professor is fine. And so the tiger curled back up, went back to sleep. She was able to finish the thing with the school with that professor. No problem. So the key is you listen to your tiger when it tells you there's a problem, or listen to that when the hippo is giving the tiger an issue. But you also got to listen to the owl that says, I don't know if it's necessarily this person. Maybe it's how it's making me feel. Maybe it's about something in my past, whatever. Like, let me pause.
Right.
Then once you pause, you might be able to connect the dots between the two. Maybe.
So basically, it's folks, we encourage you to kind of do your own parts work, you know, in the workplace, just like you would in therapy session, just like you would your personal life, because it will benefit you. I mean, it will service you to be able to understand yourself better. Is this a me problem, a them problem? It can help with improving relationships. So regulation in the workforce, working in the workforce. Amy, I think we're just about at that. We are at time. Folks, follow us as always, Regulation Revolution, Facebook, our webpage. You can hear us on Spotify, YouTube. Send in your feedback, topic ideas. We'll take it all. And Amy, thank you for what you brought to the table with this one. This was good.
It was great. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yes, ma'am. I will see you down the road.
Bye.
Bye-bye.